Now, please help me welcome our speakers. We have Chris Paxton, who is the owner and senior developer at D3 Training Solutions. And we also have Dan Richards. Dan is the vice president of professional services and learning solutions architect at Interactive Advantage. Welcome, Dan and Chris. The session is all yours.
Okay, let me hang on, share my screen. Okay, and I think actually, Cassie, don't you, Casey, don't you have a poll first for us?
Do you want to get started with the poll first?
I
Okay.
think, well, actually, Dan, do we, or?
Well, if you want to go through a couple of our introduction slides and then
Okay,
before you jump into the meat of it, we can do that poll. Yeah.
perfect, okay. Then, do you want to drive or do you want me to? We didn't talk about this part.
Oh, sorry. No, go ahead, Chris. It's all yours.
Okay. I want to say hello, welcome. My name is Chris Paxton McMillan. I am the founder. My contact information is there. Casey knows how to reach me. Dan knows how to reach me. You can also reach me on LinkedIn and YouTube and email and all kinds of stuff out there. And I really need to get a new photo. I know.
And Chris, we're just sorry to interrupt. I think we're seeing a Word document. We may not be seeing the monitor with
Oh,
your
whoops, hang
PowerPoint slide
on. Stop share
presentation.
there. Okay, let's see. Share screen too. It shared the wrong screen. Yep. Okay, perfect.
Now we
So
gotcha.
there we go. Okay, so now here is all of my information and how to reach me. I am, as mentioned, the president and senior developer, also the housekeeper, the janitor, you name it, everything at D3 Training Solutions, where we design, develop, and deliver training solutions. As a company since '98, I first joined the field in '92, and I'd rather say the year versus how long it's been because it makes me feel old. So, Dan.
Yep. Thank you. I'm Dan Richards with Interactive Advantage, and we've been in it for coming up on 28 years now, creating learning materials for professionals in the workplace. We do a lot of work for federal government, for state and local governments, and for commercial entities and not-for-profits. So a bit of everything as far as our clientele. But again, that common thread is adult learning in the workplace for improved performance and compliance. We also have a very strong accessibility capability to serve all of those clients better. But we're a very process-driven organization as far as how we approach the creation of materials. And that kind of drives what we're going to be talking about today. Chris is the same way. She likes to get things efficient and really take full advantage of the tools that we're using. So we hope to share some of our practical experience with you.
And I want to say, Dan, I remember I first worked with you all in '09. So long relationship, and always great to work with you all. So
1909, that is a long time ago. Man.
Our beauty secrets here. Yeah. About 2009 sounds a little better. No, actually, it was before. No, maybe it was. Anyway, so let's talk about converting PowerPoint to Lectora. And we have a question for you. Case May, let you. So just curious, what is the likelihood that you will use Lectora's PowerPoint conversion feature? Not likely at all, very likely. Sign you up, you need more information. Where are you on this? I'm trying to remember why they're answering that. Dan, when did the PowerPoint conversion come in? It was in the early.
Yeah, it's been around for a long time, and it's, of course, gone through a somewhat recent update. They've added some really nice features and some flexibility, some power to the tool. And in fact, that's why Chris and I did this very presentation out in Las Vegas at DevLearn, is because it was relatively new at that point as far as the new features. But yeah, boy, it's been around forever.
It has. And I love Nicole. Her response in the chat is, you could tell us more about what it entails and the updated features. I'm so glad you mentioned that. But it looks like many people need more information, so you're in the right place. Sign you up. 16% very likely and 16% not likely at all. Okay, great. Thank you. Well, then let's go through, and I actually do have a question of my own, and that is just to see where you all are with it. And it may have kind of already answered in the other one. Casey May? Yeah. So do you currently, and this kind of goes in the other, a little more detail, do you currently convert PowerPoint presentations into Lectora? And again, then do you want to? So, Dan, you've got a note there from George talking to you in 2010. I'm wondering if that was a Lectora user conference. And this just gives me an idea of what. Okay, so do you currently know and do you want? Okay, the reason I like to ask that is just like another seminar we're going to do, I think next month about library objects, is we find as longtime users is that people who use certain tools within the tool love it and use it all the time. And those who have never used it are like, yeah, I've never really needed to or whatever. And so what I want to do here first is point out again, for those who know it, we think it's kind of a snap. We're going to review some of the fundamental processes, and I'm going to give you some of my own personal best practices for this time saver before Dan continues and we wow you. I say we, Dan wows you with some of the new features that are just really huge and time saving for all of us. And so basically, anytime you're importing PowerPoint, there's just some things that I like to do because so often our clients will send us a PowerPoint and they say, here's my class, make this pretty, do whatever. And they think it's almost done. And you can easily bring it into Lectora, but there's some things that I prefer to do to save me time in the long run once it's in Lectora. And so the basics here is that, whoa, oops, sorry about that. I clicked the wrong thing. There you go. Go on here. The first thing I need to do is to make sure that I've set up either removed the master slide objects or make sure I want to import them as a group object because otherwise they're going to be all kinds of individual objects I'm going to have to clean up and move around once it's in Lectora. We'll talk more about this in a moment. The other thing I'm going to want to do is just be aware when I bring in historically a PowerPoint, PowerPoint natively advances by using the spacebar and enter. And so that code or that action actually is imported into Lectora when we bring it in. So I've always had to remember, take that off because that's not how I want them to advance once I've created some computer-based training. So again, some of this seems like it may be minor things, but these are all additional things that are work, additional clicks, and that time takes money and especially as we're a contractor, we're always asked to do more in less time. The other thing that you had to do is before this to even work at all is you had to have PowerPoint actually installed on your computer. So not bad, but what if I don't have PowerPoint? So those are just some of the basics. Now, one of the things I still to this day kind of do is I encourage people to delete any of their unwanted slides. And those could be things like your classroom information, your activities, maybe a disclaimer. A lot of times I may have things hidden in the back that I don't want to bring over. I prefer to delete all of that excess. I also kind of like when I talked about the master slides, I prefer to clear out that background artwork from the master slides because I usually don't want to use their stuff. Like I'm working on something right now and the client sent over and I'm like, wow, that isn't even, I mean, it's a pink and the pink isn't actually even their pink for their own internal style guide. So it was like, yeah, I definitely don't want to bring that over. I want to make sure I'm meeting all of their needs. So I usually clear all of that stuff out. I leave the images on that are needed for the project. And I say this with caution though, as long as you know it's a licensed image. Because so many people, from my experience, will create a PowerPoint. They're lovely. They find all these images from the internet and they put them on, but they're not actually licensed as they should be. So that's a question I usually ask my clients. Are these all licensed? And then I make a note of it. And if not, I also go through and have those photos there. I don't import them in, or I do and just tag them. And that way I know to find something similar or replacement that actually is licensed. And the ELB library has over 1 million items to choose from, literally. The great thing about it is I'm wanting to leave the text in from the project. I don't want to have to retype everything. I don't want to have to copy and paste everything. I want everything there already. Then I'm going to I'm going to go ahead and review all, let's try this again, remove all those PowerPoint notes. And the reason for that is when PowerPoint is imported into Lectora, all the little notes at the bottom, your screen notes, that will come in as developer notes within PowerPoint, which isn't a big deal. But if you use developer notes, which I do a lot to myself so I can remember things, it actually makes those pages itself has bolded and italics. And so to me, I've used it for so long, it tells me that I still have something else to do on that page. Well, if it's just the notes I imported, I'm having to go through and either delete those or clean them out. So I prefer to get rid of them. PowerPoint can do that for you automatically before I import them in. Okay. I already said that. And then you're going to want to import from your choice. And there's 2 different ways you can do it. You can go into your tools, import PowerPoint slides, or you can go file, import PowerPoint. So multiple ways to do the same thing. Whatever way you can remember is the best way for you as far as best practices are concerned. Okay, so any questions? Okay, that's looking good there. Okay, so let's continue on then. So what actually does this mean? Well, if we can see, here's a sample of what it looks like when we import into PowerPoint. We can see it tells us where we're bringing the PowerPoint in from, what the project name is going to be. And yeah, I usually put how many slides it is just so I don't have to go back and look. And I clean that up a little later. Where I want to save the project itself. And now we start talking about your size. Here you have options for the size of your page of the PowerPoint. There's 3 options. You can do the width at 1009, and this is the actual standard Lectora page width. Lectora will actually calculate the height of your page to keep the same aspect ratio of your PowerPoint file. Is it possible? I would have to go into the PowerPoint itself. Hang on, and it will. Let's see how it looks. I believe you all get a copy of this too, and if not, I can send this out because the words will come in here in a moment. So again, you've got your project size. You can also go through and do the actual, go back a moment here. You can actually do the actual presentation size, and this will bring the PowerPoint at the size it's presented to Lectora as the original size. Lastly, you can do a custom width and height. And Dan's going to talk more about this because the PowerPoint, just know the PowerPoint size isn't the same as most e-learning size. And so that's the challenge that we're working with. It's also going to ask you about tables. Do you want that table has an image? There's some pros and cons here, and this deals with, as Dan mentioned, a lot to do with accessibility and whether or not how it's going to show up again to the screen readers, how it's going to show up within their tabbing. So it's something you're going to want to think about as to whether or not you bring it in as an actual image. For the transitions itself, Lectora supports many of the transitions, and they've actually added more transitions with this recent upgrade. And so from here, you decide whether you not want to import them with no transitions, only supported transitions, or have them remapped to the specific supported transitions. Okay, so that's been pretty standard somewhat. Well, the new advanced options are that now we can control a few more aspects of how our files actually imported. For our image, we can decide, do we want to use PNGs, JPEGs, or GIFs? And by default, it's set to PNG since that's the most popular image format, but you can change that. It will also allow or ask if inheritance is allowed. And this sets some of those common shapes at the project level, which I think is fabulous. So it's not necessarily on each page if it's repeated on each page. Huge, huge time saver. Finally, whoops. I loved this one. I think they did this personally for me. Add PowerPoint page advance. It's now asking me, do I want to advance with the space bar or with the answer, and I can say no. So I don't have to remember anymore, turn it off or delete it on each page. So I think this is absolutely huge. The same is true with shaping groups. This is another one that I think they did for me. I have a client that builds a lot of their own custom images, um, designs for like oil and gas type things. And I import them and I go to move them, not realizing the first time that each of them was an individual element. And so my moving distorted the whole thing. And so for me, it is best if I import it all, create it as a shape group, and basically it will remap those shapes, um, or import, I'm sorry, import the groups of shapes. So now I can move it and it's all as one. Okay, so whether I want to turn that into an image itself or keep it as an editable shape. Okay, once you've configured all of these things to your liking, you would submit okay. Then you would simply just go through like we would normally. We would check the text placement, the fonts, reapply any animations that you didn't like. You'd actually just go into your test phase. And of course, we have to plug in that you would optimize for accessibility, making sure alt text is there on all images, making sure you're using all your standard fonts, basically meeting your style guide, and making sure it's a set and ready to go for screen reader support. You'll test the output. Hopefully you like what you've done and you can actually then save your template for future use. So hopefully these tips can actually streamline the PowerPoint to Lectora workflow and minimize your post-import editing. And now Dan is going to share with us the really cool new stuff out there. Dan?
All right, thank you, Chris. Great job. And some folks in the audience were asking about zooming in to see things a little closely on our screens during the presentation. Just remember, everybody, you can hold down your control key. At least I know you can do this on Windows. Just like when you're zooming in, when you're viewing a browser or a lot of other things, hold down your control key, scroll with your mouse wheel, and you can scroll forward in essentially to zoom in and out, and then you can drag and move your screen around just in case you need to see something small. Chris and I did have to take a lot of screenshots to show you certain things, and some of them are teeny tiny because there's so much to show you. But yeah, we'll get you copies of this presentation afterwards, so that we can, you'll have a chance to see all this for yourself close up and for yourself as well. So, okay, let me share my screen. I will have some tiny things too, but hopefully not too tiny. And switching. Okay, there we go. So we're going to pick up where Chris left off, and hopefully everybody's seeing my screen where you can see the extreme techniques now. We're going to pick up where Chris left off. A lot of the things that she told us are really valuable for this next step, and this is going to be a little bit of a magic trick, a little bit of sleight of hand. Some of the things that are really critical, and an overall concept is that Chris shared is get your PowerPoint configured as best you can before you bring it in. And that's not just true for converting in Lectora, it's true for converting in a lot of different tools, because this PowerPoint process, it can be very powerful for a high volume of content that you need to convert, but it can be a garbage in, garbage out process, because what you have is PowerPoint decks that are simply not ready to be e-learning. And they may take a little bit of massaging. Although there is just essentially push a button and it goes, you may get what you get out of it, what you put into it to some degree. So what I'm going to show you is how to get a little bit more out of it by doing a little bit more prep to begin with. And it may yield a slightly different result or give you a little bit more flexibility. All right, so let's get into it. One of the things I'm going to show you is how to add vertical space above and below the content that you want to put inside Lectora. So what your PowerPoint stuff, when you're converting, you just have to imagine that when it comes into Lectora, it's going to take up every last pixel of room, vertically and horizontally. If you've got, let's say, no room for navigation buttons, or the logo on the screen or page counter or other things that we would expect in an e-learning experience, you need to add a little bit more room to the look and feel to allow for those things above and below your content while preserving the content and not skewing it, not having to go in and move everything around in advance before you do the conversion. So this is sort of a quick and I think pretty smart way to get ready. But we're going to add some pixels of space to the top and the bottom right before we convert. And then you're going to see why that was so valuable to add our e-learning navigation elements. To do this, we are going to have to think about a little teeny bit of math. So I'm just giving you fair warning. It's not a ton of math. And with this PowerPoint in hand in the future, you'll be able to refer to this and easily using a calculator or ChatGPT come up with exactly the numbers that you need. It's a very simple formula. Because as Chris said, you know, PowerPoint speaks in a different rule than e-learning tools like the Lectora. So PowerPoint's dealing with things in inches, Lectora is dealing with things in pixels. And so if we need to add some space, and we know that it needs to be 90 pixels above and below, we know that we really need 180 pixels total of additional height to be added to our PowerPoint before we convert it. And we want that to be at the top and the bottom to add a top bar and a bottom bar after conversion. So taking into consideration the PPI, the pixels per inch, and how PowerPoint represents its stuff, we can figure it out for pretty much any PowerPoint presentation. So the one that we happen to be looking at here, the one that we're in, is it just happens to be 5.625 inches tall. That's how tall it is. And to add the amount of room that we need, you can see that the formula here tells us I'm going to need to add 1.875 inches of vertical height to my project, my PowerPoint, which will bring the total size of that PowerPoint, the vertical height, to 7.5 inches. So that's very interesting. And then when we do that, and this is how we're going to do it. We'll see this firsthand in a moment. We'll go to the design ribbon. We'll look at the slide size feature in PowerPoint. You can see what the old size is and what the new size will be. And then lastly, we're going to look at this interesting feature option that PowerPoint provides us. So I'm going to switch over to an example that we're going to do this work together so you can see what it's like real time. So here's a PowerPoint that I want to convert into Lectora. The first thing that we do is we go to the design ribbon. And again, this would be after a lot of that cleanup that Chris was talking about. You go to the design ribbon, you go to the slide size drop-down list that you typically see on the right-hand side. You can see that there's sort of the two standard presets, but we're going to want to go to the custom slide size. And just like in that slide I showed you a moment ago, we've got the width in inches, we've got the height in inches. And there may indeed be a way somewhere deep in the dark recesses of PowerPoint for you to switch all this to pixels. But this is how you do it without having to go through that. And in our case, we're just simply going to go through and type in what the math tells us. Again, sorry it's so small, but I'm in the height line here, and I'm going to just type in 7.5, and I'm going to click OK. And now it gives me this follow-up option. It's saying, do I want to scale the content to fit this new space? So in other words, the option on the left is it's going to stretch out my content so that it takes up that extra space that I just added. Or I could use the ensure fit option, which, whoops, I just clicked it and it did, which keeps the content the same size. It doesn't stretch it or enlarge it. It literally just changes by, in this case, adding those extra pixels or inches to the top and the bottom. And you can see now that things do have a little bit more space. A moment ago, Chris's picture was right up against the top. Her name here was right up against the top. On other slides, there was not this extra space. Here, this was, you know, right up against the edges. So this is our opportunity to add that extra space top and bottom. Now, I could go a step further. I could go into the slide master for this, because obviously some of these slide master images did stretch a bit when I changed the size of the PowerPoint. I'll just do everything. Everybody seeing okay? Okay, good. So that is something you could change if you wanted to. I don't think it's going to really affect what we're doing. In Chris's case, she might even go in and remove those images altogether from the background, and that's cool too. But this basically gives us a newly sized PowerPoint that's ready to import into our project. So before I do that, I'll come in and I'll name it as something that has been sized appropriately. It's ready for conversion into PowerPoint or into Lectora with that extra space, so we can see what that's going to look like. So I'm going to switch over to Lectora, and we're going to go through that same process where here I am on Lectora's getting started screen. I'm going to add the PowerPoint, choose that PowerPoint option of all the ways of importing, and I'll browse to that newly sized PowerPoint file. And there's my one that I just added the word sized to, right? So here's the one I had before. Here's the new one that I had that's been sized. I always like to preserve a copy when I'm going to go messing around with something like that. So that's why I saved it with a new name, just to preserve that original. So now I'm getting ready to convert my sized version. In Lectora, just as Chris pointed out, you can choose what your new title name is going to be. I can determine where I want it to go. I'm just going to go ahead and go through the conversion process here. I'm only going to use the default settings. I'm not even going to go and do anything special. I'm just going to see what it gives us right out of the gate with just this one special magic trick that we're doing here to change the size. So I'll click finish and let it do its thing, and we'll see what we get. Okay, and of course that fully shut down my other monitor, which is awesome. So I'll just double check and make sure we're still cool with everybody being able to see. Just let me know if you're not able to see. But I'm assuming that that's still showing for everybody. Okay, so what we got was all of our slides are here, and we can see that extra space above and below, right? It's got a little more beefy in those sort of dead zones above and below the content, which is really great because in Lectora, we can add navigation very quickly and easily. I don't have to necessarily build it one button at a time, although I could. What I've done here is I've made it possible for us to take advantage of some of the default or stock themes that come with Lectora that can be found on the design ribbon. So for example, maybe I like the way the Rockstar look, that theme, the way that one looks. And you can see some of these themes have buttons in them and some don't, right? So obviously I need to add navigation buttons to my project. So I'm going to choose one of the themes that has navigation buttons. I can pop it in there, and now you can really see the value of having added that extra space above and below, because these top bar elements actually reside, they sit over top of, visibly over top of the content items that got converted from PowerPoint, which is really neat because now you can see they kind of, in this case, with this key theme, they partly float over top of some of that content area, but we have tons of room down there now and up above. So we're not losing anything. It's not covering any of our important content. And it's because of that space we added. Now, if I was even more careful and deliberate about this whole concept of converting lots of PowerPoint into lots of Lectora e-learning courses, then ideally I might have something in mind before I make that conversion to make it match even better with the content, so that the theme that I choose matches even better what I might have had in my PowerPoint. So for example, I know that this one called lithograph with buttons has a very similar look and feel to the PowerPoint that I used to begin with. And in fact, here you can see it uses that same sort of diagonal striping, and a lot of those same colors were used in this theme as were used in the PowerPoint that I converted. So they really look now like they belong together. They looked like they were made for each other. And in a sense, they kind of were, right? They were made probably by the same graphic design team, or at least from the same core branding templates at ELB Learning. And so that matches really well. And even if I didn't remove some of that background stuff from the PowerPoint, because I was more deliberate in choosing a matching theme, things work really nicely. And now I have all of those parts and pieces that I need to make an e-learning course. So again, going from something that was just static PowerPoint to something that's navigable and can be made more dynamic quite easily, as long as I do a little bit of planning in advance. So I'll stop there for any questions before we go on to our next magic trick. And Casey, maybe you can help me with the questions panel because I have a lot of things open if we have any questions.
We are good.
Okay, great. Everybody's following along well then.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm gonna, before we move on to what's next, is we asked you a poll question a little while ago. How likely are you to use the PowerPoint conversion? And there may be some things that you've learned now that change your perspective on that. I'm just curious how that might look. And so, Casey, I'm hoping you would launch that poll. Yeah, thank you. Again, knowing that you have a little more control with these new features, knowing that there are some tips, tricks, magic tricks that you can perform that may give you an even better and more deliberate looking result. I'm very curious to see how you all feel about the possibility now of using PowerPoint in the future.
And I want to give a plug. We had a great question come in, and I've added it to our future sessions to do too. For those who don't know what Lectora is, maybe give a brief overview of the product and then jump into the do's and don'ts. So thanks for that question. And I typed it in, and I'll go ahead and go over it. Basically, Lectora is created by ELB Learning, and it is a rapid development authoring tool. So with this, you can actually create engaging interactive e-learning courses without any of the programming knowledge out there. And of course, that stuff can include text, graphics, animation, audio, video, screen simulations, interaction scenarios, branching, knowledge checks, a quiz at the end, you name it. It is available for Windows or desktop users or online for Mac, Linux, and Windows users. And of course, the courses can be created for mobile use and used on any device. And in my personal opinion, and I think Dan would agree with me, it is the best and easiest tool for creating accessible courses that will actually meet WCAG, which is Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, AA or AAA standards.
Yeah, thanks for addressing that one, Chris. That is a great question. And, we take that for granted, but yeah, Lectora, yeah, and here's our poll. We'll get that in a sec. But one more thing to add to the history of Lectora and what it does. Lectora has been around for over 25 years, I think now, as a tool that helps us take our content and our media, bring it all together in an interactive e-learning format. And it makes our job easier in that process. The thing to remember is in that time, in the last 25 plus years, there have been so many strong features added to the tool. There's a lot to the tool. It's a big, robust program. To learn about it and all of its features, may take a little time because it's not just a shallow, simple one-click app. There are options, to give you more control and more flexibility, and it's meant to be a powerful enterprise tool for that reason. Okay.
Which I'm going to plug in. Actually, I'm going to interrupt one more time because it followed up with another great question. Will we have any training sessions on Lectora by any chance? And yes, Dan and I conduct the training sessions through IC, and we do it every other month. And I think we've got one coming up. Is it this month or is it next month?
There's almost always one on the horizon. And if you guys want to go, you can either find that on elblearning.com or you can look at interactiveadvantage.com in our training offerings, and you'll see the Lectora classes there. Chris often handles the fundamentals and intermediate classes, and I handle the advanced class that we teach. So there are sort of three primary levels of Lectora training that we do. Each is a day long. And
our next one is in July.
Thank you.
23rd and 24th and 25th.
And we do private group classes too. Usually the ones Chris is referring to is those are, open to the public open enrollment classes where anybody can sign up. If your organization needs more of a one-on-one private situation to address your unique and specific situations, we do that too. Okay, so let's look at our likelihood about PowerPoint now that we've learned a little bit more. Looks like we have a little bit more in the likely category, but still looking for a little bit more information. And I think that's a really good answer. The answer is this is a powerful and flexible aspect of a powerful and flexible tool. And the more you know about what you can do with PowerPoint, you'll know whether it's the right thing for you. There are a lot of ways to go about this. And to really determine whether it's the optimal way for you to go about putting content into Lectora and getting it into an interactive, media-rich, accessible format, you might want to take a look at the different options. Training can help. You can talk to me and Chris about other options given your unique situation. So it's really good to know and evaluate whether this really is the right way, since there are so many ways. Okay, cool. So I'm going to show you guys another cool feature of Lectora that makes it media rich and interactive. And for this, I'm going to switch over to Lectora Online just for a moment to show you guys something. So you may know this when you first log into the studio in your browser. You can see all the different tools that may be at your disposal. Of course, Lectora Online is the one that I've already clicked. So I clicked that button and I've launched into Lectora Online. It brings us to the Getting Started area. In fact, there are several tabs available for you on the Getting Started screen or on the main home screen. So on that Getting Started tab, the one that I wanted to point out to today is called Converting a Classroom Video. And all you have to do is click this and it will add it to your project or add it as a project into your Lectora Online grouping of projects. I've already done that, and this is what it gives you when you add it to your project. Essentially, it gives you the main piece, the main page that it gives you is this video with pop-up questions. And that's a really good description of what we're looking at here and what this cool custom interaction does. The whole idea is that this is a template you can easily add to any one of your projects. It can take on the thematic branding and of any project you might already have. And in this case, what it does is you can plug in a video. So if you already have, let's say, a recorded webinar or another video that you need your students to watch, you can assign that video to this video placeholder. And then you can have a number of questions pop up during the playing of that video. So at different specified points, let's say after 3 minutes, 3.5 minutes, after a concept has been introduced and covered, you want to ask a question about that. Well, that's what this is all about, is you can have these questions pop up, have the student interact, get feedback on how they're responding to that question, and then close that question and continue watching that same single large video. So this is a really cool interaction. I want to encourage you guys to take advantage of. I'll show you kind of how it works, and it does come with instructions, as you can see on the left hand side here in the gray space to the left of the page. So you can just read the instructions, but basically what it's telling you is plug in the video, write out your unique questions and answers, and then set that timing so that the right question comes up at the right time in the video. So I'm going to just show you very quickly how to do that. And I'm going to show you a clever way how to save it to your instance of Lectora for easy reuse on any of your projects later. So the first part is to go to the video, which you can find right here in the Project Explorer. There's the video object. I can go to the properties at the top. And of course, this is where I can change it to play a different video. So that would be step number one, right? I would change it to a different video. Right now, the placeholder video that's in there is a countdown that goes from 1 minute down to 0, just as a way for us to see that, yeah, there's a video running in there. It's just a simple visual to place hold. Now, second thing was I would go to my questions. Here's my first question. I can go to again, the properties ribbon at the top, edit that question, where I can change the actual question text to whatever I want it to be. And I can change whatever my answers are. I can add additional answers. I can declare which one is correct or incorrect. And I can move through this simple form, defining the feedback that will display when my users get the answer right or they get it wrong. So I can be instructional even as they interact. I can manage the number of attempts if I want to limit them to a certain number of attempts before they're required to move on. You'll notice also that this cool interaction comes with its sort of own navigation buttons, its own next and back. And there are some already pre-built actions that manage whether that next button is showing. So you may require, for example, that the students attempt to answer all of the questions and watch the whole video before the next button becomes active. You may even require that they answer all the questions correctly before they're allowed to move on and get access to that next button and move on to whatever's next in your course. Again, this is although this templated interaction is already set up for you, all of that stuff is customizable. There's nothing proprietary or locked down about this template. So you can make it whatever you want it to be. And with just a little bit of training on how to develop with Lectora, you'd be able to change those actions and implement that kind of functionality. So the third piece was, did I cover all of them? Yes. Which video, what your question content is, and then lastly, what's your synchronization? What's your timing so that you're bringing up the right question at the right time with the video? Now for that, I'm going to go back to the video player itself. So that's what's selected. I'll go up to my properties ribbon. And in this case, I'm going to be clicking sync events. The sync events button will open. And I just want to make sure I'm not getting too far along. Casey, am I still showing okay and sounding okay? And do we have any questions so far?
Yep, you look and sound good, and we do have some questions.
Okay.
Queued. Chris is helping to kind of type them out to individual people, but we'll want to address that stuff too.
Good. Well, once I do this third step, I'll be glad to answer any other questions and go back and review this as people might like. That's great that people are asking.
Yeah.
So this is a really easy interface to work with when you're trying to set up synchronized events with a video. You can essentially just start the video playing, and you can see again, this is just a video of a countdown timer, but it can reach a certain spot and I can hit add event at that spot. It pauses the video. Here I paused it at a certain point where there's 7 minutes and 91 seconds, I guess, left over in this video. And I can set it up to do a certain action. Like I could say, hey, I want to run the action group associated with a certain question number. And that's what's been done here. Someone has actually added 3 events for us to begin with. Each one of them is running an action group for a specific question. And that action group is, of course, to show that question, to hide the other questions that might be showing, so that the student is ready to interact with the right question at the right moment. So in this case, I've got it set to 5 seconds. I want something to come up at just 5 seconds so we can see this working. So with that in mind, let's see if it works. I'm going to go and do a quick preview. And there's 1, 2, we'll let it roll here. And for 5 seconds, there we go. It ran for 5 seconds and it did exactly what I wanted. It triggered the first set of actions that caused the first question to show. Now, as a student, I can decide what I want to answer. I can get feedback on that may be instructional. Again, if we let them have multiple attempts, they can try again. So this time I got it correct. I can always re-explore those other options to see why they may have been wrong or right. And then when I'm done as a student, I can click the close button and it returns to my video and it continues to play, and it will continue to play until it reaches that next timer event and it shows the next question. So that's some really cool stuff. There's a lot of really interesting instructional design and thought that went into this, and the functionality is already there. But again, there's nothing that you can't go in and customize and change to make it exactly the way you want it. And here's the other neat part. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll take questions before I share that one really cool, neat part with you. So, Chris, if you want to bring up any of those verbally, or Casey.
I can. Let's see. Actually, we had another question come through the chat. Let me get that one first. Where they just do it, the chats. Oh my. Answering questions all at the same time here. We'll go ahead and move on this other one. To tag on to Dan's template section, is it possible to create company templates within Lectora? Working for a government agency, we don't typically get to choose such fun or attractive themes. I answered, great idea, and yes. In fact, that's one of the first things we recommend is creating a template or 2 that meet your company style guide and standards. Huge best practice and time saver. What would you add, Dan?
Yeah, and one of the things you'll notice about a lot of these templates is they're easy to customize. So for example, this one has an already existing placeholder for a logo. And so it's, a lot of when people are starting to work with Lectora, they just begin to realize that most of what you see in the Lectora interface is really just a placeholder for whatever piece of media you want to drop into it. And that's the case here. This is an image placeholder, and I can easily go to the properties and I can choose a different image. If I've already got something on my machine that I want to, and it looks like I don't have anything real handy. Let's see here. If I wanted to add an image, hey, there's a Lectora thing I did with me as David Hasselhoff. That's awesome. So now I can plug that in, and that's my logo. So whatever image you want to put in there as a logo, you can do that. And a lot of the other components are changeable as well. So for example, I can move all of these items around. You can see I'm moving the title space around. I can move the whole thematic group around. I can go in, and these are shapes. So the nice thing about like the top bar, for example, if I wanted to go in and change the color of that shape, I could change the color to more of an appropriate color for my branding just quite easily. So if this was more my brand, I could do that. So very easily, these themes can be tailored. Even if you don't have a graphic designer on staff who might give you a really sexy, cool image for the top or bottom, there are a lot of really cool, sexy, cool ones that come with Lectora. And again, all of those are fully customizable. So you could start with one that's real close, and then you could, modify it however you wanted to.
I have another question, and this goes back to what you just talked about. Did you say this only works with directly added video, not streaming or embedded? Also wonder if there's a recommended max length video size for it to work seamlessly for the end user.
I don't know about the synchronization. I haven't tried that with this particular question interaction. I think when it comes to streaming, if you're streaming from YouTube or Vimeo, there may be different ways you would have to get a read on how far it was along in its play time for you to then trigger the showing of a question. It may still be possible, but it may be just a smidge difference. The key in this case is it's a video that's inserted into Lectora via the properties, via this file selection. When you do that and you add that video to your project, that video is added to any of the packages that you create. So if you're going to create a course with videos in it like this one, those videos will be now part of your course package that you would upload to your learning management system. They would add to the file size of that package. So videos, of course, would make things much bigger. It would take longer to upload, and you'd be storing that video on your learning management system in a sense to then serve it up and play it for your learners, because it's, again, part of the files that comprise the course. If you're instead streaming a video, which I always highly recommend, you're relying on the video streaming service to just simply stream that into a rectangular space on your Lectora page. So if that's coming from YouTube or Vimeo, that's generally a great idea for a lot of reasons. Most of all, it's going to perform so much better for your learner. Most of our learning management systems out there aren't really optimized to serve up video and play it really smoothly and make it load really fast, and for it to be aware of what kind of device, mobile or otherwise, the student might have, and what kind of display size they have, what kind of bandwidth limitations they may have. And that's really the advantage of using Lectora's ability to stream video into your project. But that is a great question. I'll have to look into this particular template and what might have to be changed, if anything, to support that synchronization for a streaming video. That'd be pretty cool.
Another question come in and said, basically, I think the question was about max length or having to cut the video into micro learning bites. And I'm thinking I was going to reply that if the video is streaming, there's some code you can add to the start and stop, like if it's streaming on YouTube, and have it start within a certain time, but you have to convert it into seconds. Is there another way?
Yeah, there several streaming services have that ability where you can use a little bit of custom code, some JavaScript, and you can tell it, hey, I want it to start at this specific spot or end at this spot, which is really handy because you could have a very long video, and you could essentially have virtual segments where you could give your students buttons or links to jump to specific sections. One fun little thing we've done in the past is when we ask questions, quiz questions, we give our students the ability to review the information as it was originally presented in a video, by jumping right to that spot in the video, watching it again, as it covers that concept, that learning objective that was mapped to that question, they can review that segment of the video dynamically and then maybe try the question again. So yeah, there's some really neat things that can be done. There's not really a limit, if you're just inserting a video like we've shown here, other than, again, you're going to make the size of your course much larger. The course package is going to be bigger. And a lot of learning management systems do have an upload limit, a file size limit, or a timeout period. So depending on any limits there could be challenges. So again, it's one of the things that you gain by moving to more of a streaming capability. Of course, you could segment up your videos into smaller videos. That would be nice for the learner in a sense, but it doesn't actually really solve the core problem, because you still have a whole bunch of video. If it was an hour long before, it's still that big, even if you've broken it up into 10 little segments. So again, just maybe thinking about that streaming option as a great alternative to inserting the file directly.
And then there's a couple more questions, but I think you still got more to show. What asked is, do we have a course on streaming knowledge? And I suggested the advanced course, but also that they could purchase blocks of time to meet. I know I've done that with Dan before, because coding is not my thing either. And you can purchase those, and we'll work with you individually too.
Yeah,
And
just let us know. But
I'll
you're
send a note to Leah.
Yeah, Leah would be the perfect contact for that. But yeah, it is one of the things we cover in the advanced classes. And in fact, I think in intermediate we cover YouTube, and then
Yes.
in advanced we cover how to stream Vimeo videos using embed code, which is pretty cool. And we get into that a little bit there, and that's a cool exercise, and it really covers some of the things we're talking about today. Yeah. Okay, we better move on, because we're getting close to the top of the hour, and I want to be sensitive to everybody's time availability. Just a quick check back of where we are in the overall PowerPoint here. That's not it. That's okay. Oh, you know what? I don't think we need it. Our last step is, okay, we've got our PowerPoint converted. We've got our really cool, slick video in there. Now what? What do we do next to get it deployed to our learning management system? How do we do that? Well, there are essentially three things that every Lectora course needs to be ready to be deployed to a learning management system using the SCORM standard. And if you're not familiar with the SCORM standard, again, it'll be in the PowerPoint, but it stands for SCORM is SCORM as in Mary. It stands for Shareable Content Object Reference Model. It's an international standard for how e-learning can talk to a learning management system and vice versa, so that a learning management system can launch the course and tell the course what the user's name is, or what their user ID is, what their language preference is, and tell it in such a language that it actually understands what it's saying. And then the e-learning course can say, oh, okay, thank you. And by the way, here's their quiz score. And it's sharing that information in a specific format. So what I'm going to show you here is how to make sure that all of that communication can happen for tracking and reporting purposes. Three things that you have to do. Here's the first thing that every project will need, and that is you go to the design ribbon, you open up project options, and you look at the type of project that it is set up to be. A standard project is one that will simply output HTML, and it can run on a web server like a website. Your whole course could go out there like a website if you wanted to. There isn't a lot of tracking. There is some tracking via cookies that can take place, but as far as tracking for generating reports and things like that, you would need to choose the second option, AICC and SCORM for LMS. Now, I mentioned SCORM a minute ago. The other acronym here, AICC, is an even older one. It was put out by the airline industry way back, like in the early 90s, I think. And again, it was a standard for how data is communicated between e-learning and a database, a learning management system with a database. And boy, that's back before they even put the E in e-learning, I think. But you know, SCORM is still sort of the new and current standard for most folks out there. So you declare that you want it to be a SCORM course. Here's an option down here. Do you want it to retain tracking status between sessions? Usually you would say yes, and that's enabled by that, as far as, you know, tracking, let's say, what page they were on, if they got halfway through it, what buttons have they clicked, what links have they visited, how many points have they earned so far on some activity. All of that will be part of what can be tracked and reinstated as they relaunch a course that might still be in progress. Okay, so we turned that on. I'm going to click OK. It adds this interesting feature to our project right here, this A001 that we can see in the Project Explorer. That's called an assignable unit, where it basically gives me some properties and information now about how this is going to be, how this course is going to communicate with the LMS. Things like, hey, what's the mastery score that someone has to achieve across all of the one or more quizzes that might be within this course? And you can report back one score to the learning management system. What's the mastery score that would be associated with that? So there's some neat stuff that we can set at this assignable unit level now for tracking. That's step number one. Step number two is you are supposed to have an exit button with an exit close action, or you at least need the exit close action somewhere in your project. So we can see, because we chose a theme that does have an exit button, and here it is, and it came by default with an exit action on it, so that would actually close the course. Here is that exit action. You can see amongst all the other actions available to me in Lectora for buttons, we chose here, the template maker chose exit and close. And that's important because the learning management system needs to kind of know that when the user does click an exit button, it needs to know how to close the e-learning, but not the entire LMS, right? You only want to close that one frame or that one page that popped up to display the e-learning, but not the entire LMS window. So this is us telling Lectora, yeah, there's going to be an exit button, and it will, in other steps later, we'll be able to tell it how far to go in that window closing, frame closing process. Okay, that's number 2 of 3. So the third thing, and this is really important, we need to have some place in this project where we can declare that the student has completed what they needed to complete to get credit for the whole thing. Let's pretend that's when they get to this page. Happens to be the last page of my project. So when they get here, they land here, I'm going to give them full credit for this course. Now, of course, I could make it much more robust than that. I can say, yes, they have to land on this page, and they have to have gotten at least an 80, and they have to have visited every page, and they have to have watched that video all the way through. So there are a lot of caveats or conditions that we can place on that, but I'll show you the simplest version of the action that you would need to create here. So firstly, it's easy to add an action. You just choose which page you want to add it to. So I've selected that last page. I go to the insert ribbon and the action drop-down list, so I can see what my options are there. It's not a timed event. It's just going to be the fact that they've landed on this page that immediately we're going to give them credit in this simple case. So I'll add that action. Here is the action. I can name it and set it up. So I'll do on show, which means when the page loads. This is just the name I'm giving it. Mark completed. So just me as a developer or other developers will know what the purpose of this action is just by looking at the name. And then again, I work from left to right. I'm going to do this action on show. That means when the page loads, there will be no delay between the time the page loads and my action executes. Here's my action that I'm going to allow to fire at that moment that the page is loaded. And in this case, this special action requires us to modify a variable. And this is one of the things we cover in class quite a lot. What is a variable? What does it mean in the context of this e-learning experience? How does that work in conjunction with other interactive elements to make a larger interactive experience? So we talk a lot about what variables are. But for today, just know that there are some special variables I can manipulate because I declared that this is an AICC SCORM course a few minutes ago. So now I can manipulate those values and cause certain communication to take place with the LMS. In this case, lesson status, I'm going to set it equal to the word completed, which is a magic word in this world of LMS stuff. And that's all there is to it. I've done the three things, and now I can go through with the publishing process. And Chris is going to come in and help me with the last couple screens here. And I'm sorry, we may run a minute long, but when you start your processing for SCORM, you get this dialogue where you can choose things like, hey, here's that exit close window. If I'm going to launch my course in a new window, do I want it to report test and survey questions? So there are some really good options here available to me. And Chris, did you want to cover anything on this HTML options tab while we're here?
Yes, I was just going to put some of the big things that I like to do is, again, create the zip file. Most LMSs seem to prefer Lectora creating the zip file versus you creating it on your own. But again, this is something that once you figure it out, you'll put it in your style guide for all future use and put it in your template. Then the other thing is on desktop options. I personally like to only show the desktop view and then do the scale for entire page to fit. And then if I want it to be responsive and just automatically reduce and not necessarily customize for each view, you would need, of course, make sure responsive is turned on under design, but then check the box that says mobile options, which isn't showing available because we don't have responsive turned on. And that way it'll automatically just shrink and reduce everything from your desktop view, just like some other tools do, if you don't want to customize per each view.
Right, and that mobile design concept that Chris was referring to is something we cover in intermediate and advanced also. So you can learn more about how to optimize your courses for mobile devices as well. But essentially, once you have your settings chosen, Lectora will go through the whole process. If you had not created an exit button, if you had not added that special action, then it would give you some messages about that. But otherwise, you're ready to go. You click browse and it brings you directly to your zip file that Lectora created for you. And that is now ready to upload into your learning management system and interact and track the way we hope it will. So that's pretty much the basics of working with SCORM. But hopefully you guys have seen now that it's fairly easy to, and with lots of options, move your content from PowerPoint, move your video content, and your assessment content into Lectora rapidly with lots of options, and then to easily deploy that to a learning management system compliant format.
Awesome. This is another one of those nitty gritty presentations that you two are famous for, but we really appreciate all your expertise. You guys put us to work in this comment section and the Q&A section. Especially Chris was in there going to town. We really appreciate all of that insight that was shared. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for attending, all of the attendees that we have here. And I think I just saw one more drop in. Can you move Canva into Lectora real quick before we head out?
So I think Canva is capable of outputting an HTML package, and there is an HTML package player, if you will, or there's a way to import that into a Lectora project. So yeah, you can import a lot of different HTML content built with a lot of different tools into Lectora. It's the same concept as the streaming video. Yep.
Awesome.
And I have a question that I'd just like Dan's thought on. It said, if you only had to choose one, desktop or online, which would you choose? Now, I answered, I prefer the desktop because I'm so rural. I can still work even if my internet isn't. I'm just curious, Dan, what's your preference and why?
I think a lot of that's habit, but I'll tell you, it makes a big difference if you're working in a collaborative setting and you've got multiple people contributing to large projects. You really got to have that Lectora online, because you can have literally people checking in pages and checking out sections and checking them in and working simultaneously. And that's a really powerful feature. So it really kind of depends on what you're doing with the product as to which one might be the best fit, but that's the biggest consideration.
And once you open the product, there's really no difference.
Yeah, they're very similar.
And so guys, too, when we end the webinar, you'll get an opportunity, all of the attendees, to let us know if you want Dan or Chris to reach out to you. Let us know if you want to hear more from ELB Learning so we can get more insight into the tool and really dig in there. So thank you all so much. Thank you for attending. Thank you guys for presenting. This has been another good one. We'll see you guys later.